From Kern Government Television, welcome to this week's Kern County Board of Supervisors meeting, originating from the County Administrative Center located at 1115 Truxtun Avenue, Bakersfield, California. Kern County's vision is to create and maintain a customer-centered county government designed to garner the confidence, support, and trust of the people we serve. Today's Kern County Board of Supervisors meeting will convene momentarily.
Board to reconvene. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Supervisor Gleason.
Here.
Supervisor Scrivener.
Here.
Supervisor Maggard.
Here.
Supervisor Couch.
Here.
Supervisor Perez.
Here.
Thank you, and welcome to the Tuesday, May 9th, 2017 PM session of the Kern County Board of Supervisors. I'm going to ask County Counsel Mark Nations for a report out on actions taken in closed session.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Closed session items that were agendized on the morning agenda 32 through 36 were in fact held. There is no reportable action on any of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nations. If you'd like to follow along with our agendas today, they're located at the two tables near the doors. And we're now going to consider the consent agenda. All items listed with a CA above the item are considered to be routine and non-controversial by county staff. Consent items will be considered first and may be approved by one motion. If a member of the audience wishes to comment or ask questions regarding an item or items on the consent agenda, they may do so prior to a vote being taken on the consent agenda. If a member of the board, a member of the board may remove any item from the consent agenda, and it will be considered in listed sequence with an opportunity for any member of the public to address the board concerning the item before action is taken. So at this time, I'm going to read the consent agenda items, and they start on page 3. Items 5 through 8 are all on consent. On page 4, items 9 through 13 are all on consent. On page 5, items 14 through 17 are on consent. On page 6, items 24 through 28 are on consent. And on page 7, items 29 and 30, as well as 33 through 37 are on consent. So are there any members of the audience that would like to make comments on the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to return to the board and ask if there are any items that a board member would like to remove. Okay, then I request a motion to approve the consent agenda and to adjourn as the Board of Supervisors and reconvene as the Kern Sanitation Authority.
So moved. Second.
Please cast your votes.
The motion is approved. All ayes.
Okay, so now we are sitting as the Kern Sanitation Authority. And if you return to page 2 on the agenda, item 1 is to be considered. This is a public hearing to consider an ordinance amending the rate for sewer service charges and authorizing collection on the tax roll for fiscal year 2017-18, an increase of $112.42 per equivalent single-family dwelling, continued use of rate adjustment formula for the next 4 years, and approval of a written report of sewer service charges. The fiscal impact to $2,774,172 in revenue. And I will ask Mr. Pope, good afternoon. I'll ask Craig Pope, our Public Works Director, to start us off on this item.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Before we get into the details of this item, I just want to give a couple thoughts. One is this is the start of the season of fee increases. I mean, it's something that we that provide the service never like to do, but sometimes we just need to. And we at Public Works are taking a look at these new fees, a very difficult, a very close look at how they are formed and make sure we believe in them and think we're doing it in a cost-effective manner. What we are trying to do is build a sustainable plan. It doesn't do us any good, we don't think, to go into providing service without collecting enough money to pay for that service, and a sustainable service. For instance, this KSA, what we're looking at is one of the problems we've had with it is that we've had some lack of maintenance, or not lack of maintenance, but degradation of some of those sewer lines, and we've had to pay over $150,000 this year in claims against us for not having the sewer lines in the condition they are. So I'll turn to Mr. Fenton and let him give a brief presentation, and then we can get into any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Pope. Good afternoon, Mr. Fenton.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. If I could get Madam Clerk to turn on the overhead. I would like to start off just a little bit with background of Kern Sanitation Authority and their treatment plant. So the red on this overhead shows the outline of the collection area. It's about 6 square miles of area that's served by Kern Sanitation Authority. There's approximately 108 miles of sewer collection system. It's a Class 3 wastewater treatment plant and a 1,400-acre disposal farm down to the south that you see there on the overhead. Currently, all of the district's facilities are paid for. The district has no debt at this time. The majority of the system was built in the late 40s and early 50s. Most of the sewer lines consist of a clay pipe, vitrified clay pipe, which after 70 years has seen its useful life. It's starting to deteriorate and it's crumbling. And we've already identified, or the district has already identified, approximately 25,000 linear feet of sewer line that's failing in need of replacement. As Mr. Pope mentioned, in the last year, we paid 2 claims pushing nearly $150,000 for failures of the system. The wastewater treatment plant was also constructed in the late 40s. Over the years, it's undergone several expansions and improvements, but certain components are also in need of maintenance severely. In addition, the current waste discharge requirements applicable to the wastewater treatment plant were issued in 1991. It's anticipated that new waste discharge requirements will be issued to KSA within the next 5 to 10 years. Based on what we've seen in the past, those discharge requirements will be more restrictive, and we anticipate some improvements will need to be made. So in order to continue providing reliable service to its nearly 11,200 parcels within the area and to continue to comply with local, state, and federal regulations, the KSA staff has developed a 10-year plan that outlines critical maintenance projects. It's also desired to maintain the current reserve of just shy of $6 million to account for the waste discharge updates as well as any unforeseen emergencies as we've experienced recently. This plan was also reviewed by an independent firm, AECOM, which not only concurs with staff's recommendations in maintaining the plant and the improvements and also the reserve balance, but AECOM's technical assessment team has audited the plant and helped to develop some of the improvements that are anticipated over the next 10 years. However, in order to implement this plan, we need to increase the rates that are currently being charged. KSA's last rate increase occurred in 2005, and the current rate is $162.58 per equivalent dwelling unit. It's being proposed that we increase that rate to $275 annually. And a review of service fees for a peer group of similar wastewater treatment facilities here in the San Joaquin Valley. As you can see from the overhead, make this a little bit bigger. KSA's rate of $162.58 is well below any of the other rates that were identified in the peer group. And in fact, even after the increase to $275, puts us right at the bottom of the list with everybody else still. Also being proposed today is the approval of an annual increase based on the Consumer Price Index to help keep up with inflation and minimize significant rate increases in the future. This rate increase will cover the expenses associated with the capital and maintenance plan projected for the next 10 years, maintain regulatory compliance, and maintain the minimum reserve balance to account for the anticipated update in the waste discharge requirements, as well as any unforeseen emergencies, and it also continues to keep KSA debt-free. Notices of today's hearing were mailed out to all of the property owners. The public meeting was held on April 5th, of which 3 people attended. That concludes my presentation, and we're here to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fenton. I'll ask if there are any members of the board that have any questions of staff. Okay. This is the time and place for the public hearing to consider the proposal to amend the sewer service charges for the Kern Sanitation Authority for fiscal year 2017-18, and the continued use of a rate adjustment formula over the next 5 years. Before I open the hearing, is there any property owner who wishes to file a written protest regarding the placement of the amended sewer service charge on the tax roll? If so, they may be filed with the clerk right now. Okay. Seeing none. Madam Clerk, have there been any written protest filed with you prior to this time?
Mr. Chairman and members of the board, 36 written protests have been received by our office and have been distributed to each supervisor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Mr. Fitton, can you please summarize the results before I open the hearing?
Certainly, Chairman Scrivener, through the board. Based on 36 written protests, as I mentioned earlier, there's approximately 11,200 parcels, so the number of written protests received fall well short of the required 50% plus one to create or to constitute a successful protest. Therefore, your board could act on staff's recommendation.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Fenton. I'll now open the hearing and receive any comments from any interested person. So is there anyone here that would like to make comment on this item? Okay, seeing none, then I will close the public hearing and return to the board. If there are any questions or comments, if not, I would entertain a motion on staff's recommendation and also to adjourn as the Kern Sanitation Authority and reconvene as the Ford City Taft Heights Sanitation District. Yes. Well, some of it. Taft is.
So moved. I'll make the motion.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Motion and second, please cast your votes.
The motion is approved. All ayes.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We're now sitting as the Ford City Taft Heights Sanitation District. This is item 2 on our agenda on page 2. This is a public hearing to consider an ordinance setting the rate for sewer service charges and authorizing their collection on the tax roll for fiscal year 2017-18. Fiscal impact, $736,800 in revenue, the Ford City Taft Heights Sanitation District. And I'll turn to our Public Works Director, Mr. Pope, once again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This is a similar item, except that this isn't a protest hearing. This is just a continuation of a plan that was already approved by your board, and I'll ask Mr. Fenton to give some details.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, as Mr. Pope indicated, the rates were previously approved on May 6th of 2014 when your board conducted a hearing at the completion of a Proposition 218 process. And at that hearing back in 2014, rates were established for the next 4 fiscal years beginning in 2014, 2015. So this is the final year of that 4-year plan, and this is really a formality, but Prop 218 requires your board to conduct a hearing to implement these rates. We're here to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Fenton. Are there any questions for staff before I open the public hearing? Okay, seeing none, I'll ask if there are any members of the audience that would like to make comment on this item. Okay, seeing none, I'll return to the board, and absent any questions or comments, I'd request a motion on staff's recommendation and to adjourn as the Ford City Taft Heights Sanitation District and reconvene as the Board of Supervisors. Supervisor Couch.
So moved.
Second.
Please cast your votes.
Motion is approved. All ayes.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And now that takes us to item number 3 on our agenda. We're now sitting as the Kern County Board of Supervisors. This portion of the meeting is public presentations, item number 3 on our agenda. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons to address the board on any matter not on this agenda, but under the jurisdiction of the board. Board members may respond briefly to statements made or questions posed. They may ask a question for clarification, make a referral to staff for factual information, or request staff to report back to the board at a later meeting. So I'll ask if there are any persons that are here that would like to make a public presentation on any item not on this agenda. Please come forward. We ask that you state your name and observe our 2-minute time limit. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Mona Sidhu, SIDHU. First, I just want to make a correction. I was here last week and I misspoke when I talked about a court decision on sanctuary cities, and I said it was the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals that had ruled cities could not be punished. It was a U.S. District Court. I don't like to misrepresent facts, even unintentionally, so I just wanted to make that correction. It was not the Court of Appeals, it's a district court. Now, to the reason why I'm here today. As you know, I've been trying to meet with the Human Relations Commission for some months now. Last year, when I was not trying to meet with them, their record for meeting was about 1/3 of the time that they had a quorum, and this year so far it's less than 50%. The last 2 months they have not again been able to meet because of lack of a quorum. So this is becoming quite a frustrating situation, needless to say. I think at this point we can agree that something needs to be done to change the structure of the commission so that it actually is a functioning body. I think one reason there may be lack of engagement with it is because it is a very frustrating process to try and engage with it. I believe there will be a proposal coming before the board, and I hope you restructure it so that it does become functional. I will not be able to attend the next meeting. I will be out of town. As you know, I am a part-time resident of this county, and I will be living the other part of my life for a little while. The reason I have been trying to engage with the committee is the prosecution of a hate crime that occurred last year fell seriously short of what it should have been. The defendant was not required to do anger management or even community service as required by the statute. It was more time and effort was spent reassuring him that his Second Amendment rights would not be affected by his no contest plea than in convincing him of the seriousness of his actions. I'm very disturbed by the way that case was handled, and that is why I wanted to have a dialogue about the issue of hate crimes in this community and the way that that prosecution has set a terrible precedent for future cases. I will be submitting to the board in the next few days. I didn't have it ready for today because I just realized I wouldn't be able to be here for the next meeting of the commission. I'll be submitting a packet of information, and I'm hoping somebody will take up the baton and continue with this process because I think it's important. I think that when I observed what happened in court, my first instinct was to go to the press, but I didn't for two reasons. One, I suspected it would cause the district attorney's office to go into defensive mode, and my purpose was to bring about some change and not simply to point fingers, and I thought a more measured response would be better. And second, no matter how you put the facts out there, you don't control them once they're out there, and it could easily be spun into a story of an armed Islamophobe with no consequences to his action being loose on the streets, and I did not want that. So I chose the more measured, laborious, and ultimately futile effort that I have been undergoing for the last 5 months, and I will continue to do so, but I hope I will have some cooperation from some of the board members once you get the facts, as I will present them to you in the next few days in written form. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sidhu. Are there any other public presentations? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to board member announcements or reports. No announcements or reports from members of the board. Then the next item on our agenda is on page 5, and it's item 18. This is under County Administrative Office. This is proposed response to grand jury report entitled The Caliente Creek Watershed. And I'll ask Mr. Alsop if you would like to start us off on this discussion, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This is a proposed response to the grand jury report issued February 9th of this year entitled The Caliente Creek Watershed. The recommendation before you is for approval of the response and authorization of the chairman to sign a letter transmitting the response to the presiding judge of the Superior Court. Our Director of Public Works and our Director of Engineering, Surveying, and Permit Services provided information included in this report, and since they are sitting conveniently over there, I would like to turn the presentation over to them for more detail.
Thank you, Mr. Alsop. Mr. Pope.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Alsop. The item before you is the grand jury report, and it comes under the CAO's office agenda. But the response was written by the Public Works, and the issue is a Public Works issue. It's actually a very big issue. It will affect many people and various departments within the county. But we took the grand jury's recommendation, and we appreciate their efforts at trying to bring light to it. And because it is such a serious problem out there, we took a serious look at what they had proposed, and we answered the questions they have within it, and that is online if anybody wishes to see it. But instead of going into too much detail there, we'd like to bring forward the information that we have been garnering since this last flood event and some of the proposals that we have, and take this opportunity to bring some light to what we've been doing. So with that, I'll ask Mr. Fenton to bring us up to date.
Thank you, Mr. Pope. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, without going into detail right out of the gate on the specifics of the report, I think it's pretty clear when you look at the report and the questions and recommendations from the grand jury. The main point from the grand jury is spelled out really in the full title of the report. We summarized it, gave the short version here, Caliente Creek Watershed, but the full title is Caliente Creek Watershed, Enforce Ordinances to Limit Flooding. Just want to start off saying this department could not agree more. We certainly fully intend to enforce those ordinances, and I think that's clear in the responses we provide. I think the issue is that others may have a different opinion how to get to that point than the direction where we've been headed. But I would like to just spend a few minutes talk about what we have done so far and where the department thinks we're going with this really long-standing complex problem. So what we've been working on for the past several months, as you're aware, your board appropriated some general fund money to conduct a study. We hired a consultant to conduct a feasibility study for the Caliente Creek habitat restoration and groundwater recharge feasibility. AECOM was a consultant that we selected to perform that study. They put together a team to do so, and I'm happy to say we do have a draft report of that in our office now for the last week and a half, and is currently under review. As I've mentioned to your board before, the study is really to determine the feasibility of a project upstream of where all these problems originate, near Highway 58, where Caliente first comes out and hits the valley floor. The thought is to spread that flood water out, drop out the sediment, and try and allow as much water to percolate as possible before it starts heading downstream. Knowing that, or suspecting that that study is going to provide some favorable discussion or favorable results, Public Works staff, we've already been meeting with the Kern County Farm Bureau. We've met with landowners in the area where we're looking at a potential project. We've met with the Arvin Edison Water District. We've met with county staff with the CAO's office to discuss SGMA and the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act and how this project might fit in with the groundwater. We've even been discussing possibly partnering with people in the groundwater business to help with the groundwater recharge component. We've been researching for available grants and other funding sources, and even looking at potential revenue stream from the project to take care of ongoing maintenance. And completely unrelated to this study, Public Works staff's also met with Caltrans staff to discuss some improvements to improve the impacts to Highway 184 that we experienced earlier this year. Again, the study is not yet finalized. However, I've gone through it, and it is clear that they are outlining or recommending a project that would have several benefits in the area that we're talking. Again, it's near Highway 58. Benefits not only for habitat restoration and groundwater recharge, title of the project, but also the main goal is to reduce, studies showing that we could reduce or even eliminate downstream flooding and sediment damage from the smaller, higher frequency storm events like we saw in January and February of this year. Some improvements of that area could eliminate any issues from that type of event altogether. And certainly once that report is complete, we'll make that available to the public. So our goal, instead of coming out with both barrels blazing for landowners that have constructed some unpermitted berms, we're trying to be proactive, take the first step. County's committed to try and make some improvements here. We think we're on the right track, and we're hoping that if we can show and do something that's going to minimize floodwaters from even getting to Rockpile Road, that's going to help us continue these discussions with the farmers, with the landowners, with the stakeholders in the area to ultimately come up with a cooperative, comprehensive approach to trying to minimize and mitigate the flooding that we've seen, including abatement of the violations that have been reported, but more importantly, to finally reduce flooding and some of the impacts that have plagued the Lamont and the surrounding area for the past several decades. So that's our goal. That's what we're trying to accomplish, not trying to come out and be divisive with a heavy hand, but trying to be cooperative and be in a position to work with the stakeholders. And they've been responsive, they've been at the table, and I think we're making some progress on it. But we haven't forgotten about the unpermitted berms that are out in that area, and I think that's pretty clear in the response to the grand jury. So that concludes what I have to say for now. Of course, we're here to answer questions if you wanted to get into detail. I see Mr. Farr in the audience, who I'm sure has some comments on this. And with that, I'll turn it back to the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Fenton. Mr. Pope, did you have something to add?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I would like to just make a brief comment on the fact that this is Public Works' first run at this. We've had an ESPS, Engineering Survey Permit Services, we've had a Waste Department, we've had a Roads Department. Never have we had the critical mass of all our departments combined together to take a look at this. And it's making a difference. We're all sitting at the same table, we're all talking about how we can help, and it really is making a difference. It wasn't a road problem, it wasn't a, ESPS may have been mostly theirs, but they didn't have the funding to do it, and it certainly wasn't a waste stream problem. But now that we're all part of Public Works, it really seems like we're making some headway.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Pope. I'll now ask if there are any members of the audience that would like to make any comments on this item.
I'll assume that means me. My name is Clark Farr. I do have several comments. I find basically that the tenor and the attitude in the responses does not match what Mr. Fenton just said. I do have copies. I try to be nice to the clerk. I'm going to be making comments directly to, and as such, I need to speak, I need to read what the recommendation is, what the response was, and then my comments. I apologize for that. It means I'm going to be running as quick, I'm going to talk as quick as I can, but I still have to read it because there's cameras, people need to see, and if I just talk about my comments, nobody will have a clue in life about what I'm talking about. So let's start off with, I would request, though, of the chair, I understand that this is not a debate forum. There is no responsibility to allow me a couple of minutes at the end to rebut. But I would request 2 minutes at the end to rebut and add my conclusions after I make my statements and Public Works has a chance to show how wrong I am. If that is in the chair's, that's in the chair's purview, and if he chooses, then I will hold off on my conclusions until after Public Works has.
I'll afford you that opportunity.
Okay, just 2 minutes. Hack me off. I've already told the sheriff's deputies in the back that I'm here to be hauled out. So, starting off with recommendation 1, floodplain management should notify all property owners in the Caliente Creek floodplain of the county ordinances that apply to the grading of soil and diversion of water. Their response. We concur with the grand jury's recommendation to increase public awareness. There are approximately 500,000 acres of floodplain in Kern County, including 35,000 residents in the Caliente Creek floodplain alone. Therefore, all ordinances are available to the public on the county's website since it is not practical to individually notify all property owners. My comments to that. The first sentence is good. It goes downhill fast from there. The use of hyperbole, i.e. the total floodplain. We're not talking about 500,000 acres. We're talking about 60 square miles total, okay? It's about 5,000 acres, not 500,000. So the use of hyperbole is uncalled for and very much an insult to the grand jury. My 32 years working for the county taught me that hyperbole is the tool used by the county to defend noncompliance and a desire to never comply. This is not an example of compromise or of a try our best attitude. Informing all 35,000 residents is asking a bit much. A public meeting, possibly two, would suffice, I think. Just having the opportunity to get out there and tell the people would take care of it. I would note that Marie Antoinette would be proud of this response. The people don't know the ordinances exist. The response is, then let them look on the internet to find them. What? Huh? They don't know that they exist, so how can they look on the internet? Recommendation number 2. Using county general fund monies, floodplain management should develop and implement a process to document the unpermitted construction and enhancement of levees as follows. Use photography, videotaping, or Google-like street-level recording, yada, yada, yada. Annually create a new database using the same methodology, compare the two, notify and provide documentation to code compliance about the possible code violations. Their response is, we do not concur with the grand jury's recommendation. Cost prohibitive equipment and staffing to use Google-like street-level recording system will not adequately identify the potential violations. Many areas, including the Caliente Creek Channel, are not adjacent to the public road. For that level of detail, the entire floodplain would need to be topographically surveyed, and the only method attempting to identify alterations is through very expensive, detailed aerial photographs, surveys, or staff to perform very time-consuming comparisons of subsequent surveys. Yeah, I do find that to be somewhat erroneous. The reason for this recommendation was that county claimed it didn't know when any particular levee was built. I had talked to Aaron Light on numerous occasions about the violations. He was in charge of floodplain management at the time. And I asked, why hasn't there been anything brought about this levee that we know is fresh? And he goes, well, it kind of shows up on some of the old aerials that were very grainy. We really didn't know. So you have the grand jury taking this up and saying, well, then maybe you ought to document what you have. Very simple. What's there? What isn't there? What gets changed? Again, the department loves the use of hyperbole. The only way is the most expensive way. OMG. Just drive the roads in Caliente upstream of the Lamont area with a video recorder. Okay? If you don't catch the channels, you don't catch the channels. The channels aren't the problem. The problem is levees built in the road right of way, levees being constructed on additional roadways, levees that are being raised from 1 foot or 2 foot to 8 to 10 feet. That's the problem, and those show up along the roads. The roads are being turned into channels. If the only thing you can do is videotape the roads, then just videotape the roads. This also relates to responses. By Public Works regarding the grand jury recommendations about code compliance that you approved last week. I had said, and what the grand jury had said at that time was, when you have a group of violations, send out code compliance and find out what else there is. Document it all so that it's all taken care of as one big group. Their response was, oh no, we can't do that. That's not what we do, blah, blah. Just do it. Go out there, find out what you have, identify the problem, identify the entirety of the problem, get it over with, and on an annual basis, rerun the roads. You're talking about probably about 100, maybe 150 miles of driving. That's about 3 hours if you keep the speed limit and don't do very much. 2 men, so you're talking, call it a day. And then just determine, okay, you already know after a year, you already know what is already there. And frankly, if they're 4 foot high, it doesn't matter if they make them 8 foot high. They're already completely blocking the water. But where are the new ones? So that you can identify and maintain and correct the violations. Recommendation number 4, Board of Supervisors should require enforcement of all county ordinances as they apply to the Caliente Creek floodplain. Their response is, violations within the floodplain have occurred for decades. The most recent violations are downstream of the existing violations, as those property owners are now trying to protect their properties and investments. A clear understanding of the potential ramifications of forcing a property owner to remove a berm that is protecting their property from floodwater diverted by upstream property owners and consequently impacting the downstream property owners is needed before a decision and clear direction is provided for staff to pursue. Also, consideration must be given to legal challenges as well as county costs to share the violation if the owner refuses to abate the violation on their own. Let me just give you a brief history of what's, sorry, my hands go. Sorry, I'm not Italian, but whatever. Let me just give you a brief history. The county adopted its first floodplain management ordinance, I believe in 1976, could have been 78. It was initially administered by the Kern County Water Agency. Building permit administration was given to the county in, I believe, 1980. It was because the water agency was taking up to 3 weeks to do one permit. So it was kind of slowing down development. The county picked up full administration in 1985 by a joint powers agreement with the Kern County Water Agency, for which the Kern County Water Agency paid the county. In other words, it wasn't costing you anything. The water agency was paying for it. The joint powers agreement was to be renewed in 1995, at which time the water agency didn't want to pay any longer, so the county just retained floodplain management responsibilities for free. I don't think that was well negotiated, but whatever. From 1978 to 1998, now my beginning and end date is off a little bit on that, the United States Corps of Engineers conducted a feasibility analysis for the construction of a dam on Caliente Creek. During this time, farmer levee construction was not abated by the county or the Kern County Water Agency under the presumed reasoning that any deleterious impacts would be moot following the construction of a flood control project. For 15 of those years, I was in charge of floodplain management. We just kind of let it go. In 1998, the United States Corps of Engineers effort ended. Also in 98, it was time to renew our ordinance, and I actually went through and read the darn thing. I hadn't done that for 15 years. Oh well, some of us don't do our jobs very well. I wrote a memo to the department head informing him that the floodplain management ordinance, as it pertained to farmer levies, was being violated. No action was directed. In other words, for 20 years now, the department has known that there's been a direct problem, has ignored the problem prior to that because there was a dam coming, and now wants to ignore it again. In addition, after the 1983 flooding, the Public Works Department sought to remediate that was where Public Works was busted up. The Public Works Department sought to remediate the proliferation of levees. 29 levees were constructed or significantly modified following the March 1st through 3rd major flooding on Caliente. For reasons for which I am unaware, I was just a simple staff engineer at the time, Public Works was directed to cease its attempts to have the levees removed. I must assume it's because, hey, the Corps is going to come up with a dam. Public Works response would appear to want, the current Public Works response would appear to want you to believe that this issue has been growing like the cancer it is for decades unnoticed and only now has become an issue. Public Works should be admonished for trying to mislead your board. Frankly, they ought to be upfront about the fact that this has been an administrative nightmare for up to 30, 40, 50, back to 1940 if you want. So it's been ignored for a long time. It's been ignored for the last 20 years solid. This response does not mention that the new levees are now forcing water into residential properties. It bemoans the poor farmer being injured by his upstream neighbor and allows that to be the excuse to damage those that cannot defend themselves. Homeowners can't build levees. They can't get in and out of their properties. They have driveways. They cannot protect themselves the same way farmers can, and the farmers are moving the water into their homes. California is not a strict public enemy state. The public enemy doctrine specifies, primarily with regards to floodwaters, that in taken at its maximum, that floodwaters are a public enemy and that you may do anything under a strict public enemy state, doctrine state, you may do anything to protect your property regardless of its impact. California is a little bit different. It requires a consideration of reasonableness. And basically, you do not have the right to damage others just because you are being damaged. I would direct that response over to County Counsel. I only know what I read. He's the lawyer. I'm not. My registered civil engineering license doesn't give me the right to practice law. Public Works' response to this recommendation seems to demand the response from County Counsel. What is the delay? It's only been 20 years since I first notified the ESPS director, or 3 years since I started my campaign to get this issue resolved since I retired. How much more time is needed? It must be noted, this is not just a floodplain management issue, this is a public nuisance issue. Regardless of whether or not the levees can be identified as violations of the floodplain management ordinance, they remain a public nuisance as they endanger the traveling public on public roadways. Remember, Vivian Robinson, January 5th of this year, died as a result of a direct result of these levees concentrating water down Edison Road. They were known to be violations, and thus you allowed it. You're responsible for it. Why she hasn't brought litigation, I don't know. It doesn't really matter. I hope she never does. Personally, I'm not big on lawyers stealing public money. As such, this is not just an ordinance issue. This is a penal code issue. Is this county really a law and order county? Does the law apply to everyone, including the rich and powerful? Or does it only apply to the weak and defenseless, or those huddled masses yearning to breathe free? Public Works' response is concerned with the cost of enforcement per the Ordinance Code abatement statutes, or per the Ordinance Code's abatement statutes, charge the property owner. That's what your ordinance already says you can do. Get your money back from them. There's no real, there's an upfront cost, but you get your money back. The response is concerned with litigation. By actively doing nothing, the county is accepting the fact that your roadways act as conveyors of unnatural levels of floodwaters, and as such, the county accepts all litigation damages resulting from harm related to the levees. Once again, I would pass that one on to County Counsel for opinion. Response to number 5. Code compliance should continue to process the 9 complaints per their policies and procedures. Their response is, we concur with the grand jury recommendations to continue processing the complaints until acceptable solutions are achieved. Public Works staff met with farmers and a water district in the area and are working towards a solution that will not adversely affect the involved parties. Now, from what I can tell, the only involved parties are Public Works, the complainant, that'd be me on all 9 of those, the farmers, a water district. Now, I'm not adversely affected. Public Works gets to get rid of this issue. The only people, therefore, who are not adversely affected would be the farmers. And I gotta tell you, it makes my heart jump with joy that the builders of these 9 violating levees will not be adversely affected by the code compliance actions. WTF. This is like informing a rapist that there's good news and better news. First, there is unquestioned proof of his guilt, but the prosecutors are too busy to take up the case, so he's free to go. Second, he didn't catch an STD from the girl he violated. Forgive my use of the rape as an example. It's really not the same thing, the personal tragedy that occurs as a result. But, however, the county is allowing the farmers to do to Lamont in many ways, or what the county is allowing the farmers to do to Lamont in many ways is rape. It is violence against the weak. It causes prolonged mental trauma and fear. It is a violation of fundamental civil rights, those of property, safety, and through the fear of employer retribution speech. To stay within compliance with the federal statutes were the following submitted. Now keep in mind, it's one thing to say, yeah, you're okay with us, but the federal statutes are why you have the National Flood Insurance Program. To stay in compliance with those, was a permit issued? You don't have to charge for that permit, but did you issue a permit? Was a study prepared that shows that the proposed development, and I'm quoting the ordinance, the proposed development does not adversely affect the carrying capacity of the special flood hazard area, which means that there's no diversion and that there's no increase in flood depths greater than 1 foot. Was a study done? I don't think it was. I think they just kind of agreed to agree. If the answer is either of those questions is no, then the county is in violation and subject to federal discipline. I've gone over that last week. I've gone over that numerous times in the past. I'm not going to waste your time doing it again. Recommendation 6. The Public Works should hold public meetings to make the AECOM final report available for comment by the Lamont Stormwater District, community residents, and property owners in the Caliente Creek floodplain. We concur with the grand jury's recommendation to conduct public meetings after AECOM's report is completed. I would just add one thing to that. Don't disagree with what they're saying. I would ask that the Board of Supervisors direct Public Works Department to post an electronic copy of the report on the department's website prior to it being placed on the board agenda to be received and filed so that proper comments can come to your board at the time of receive and file. With that, I'm ready to give my conclusions, but I would like to hear Public Works comments if they have any. Thank you.
Mr. Pope, would you like to respond to any of that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Public Works stands by its response to the grand jury. We're not here to debate Mr. Farr. We have a difference of opinion on how to go about tackling this issue. We are trying to build a community out there and build a solution that the whole community can get behind. With that, I have no, unless you have questions of us.
Okay, Supervisor Gleason?
I can wait till the
Yeah,
public hearing is closed?
Of course.
Okay.
Okay. All right, Mr. Farr?
We'll start the clock. My issue is primarily with protecting those who are not protected by the very government that they count upon to do so. It is also with the preservation and protection afforded by the NFIP. The county seems oblivious to the risk, and I have on numerous occasions attempted to inform this board of those risks to no avail. I have promised myself and everyone I've spoken with on the issue of illegal farmer levies upstream of Lamont that I would fight the issue at the county level until the county proves to me that it could not care less about the harm it has or it was allowing to occur in the town of Lamont. I have never doubted the county didn't care. I just didn't believe that it had reached rock bottom. This response to the grand jury proves to me the county has, in fact, absolutely no desire to solve the worsening flood issue concerning Lamont. At best, it will make tacit political doublespeak, empty promises. The county is gambling on the fact that neither FEMA, Department of Water Resources, or the state attorney general will take up this cause if presented to them. This is probably a safe bet. We currently have a fascist, racist president whose administration is likely open to ignoring this issue. We have 2 congressmen who believe that their only constituents are the rich and powerful contributors to their campaign and not the 750,000 residents in their districts, either of whom could request inaction by FEMA. Political pressure by the 5th District Supervisor's Office has a good chance of staying in any action from DWR in the State Ag's Office. Nonetheless, I'm going to punt this issue and test the theory. Over the next month or so, I'm going to prepare information packages, which I'll send out to all the federal and state representatives, as well as to FEMA Region 9, Department of Water Resources, Floodplain Management Section, and the Attorney General's Office. Thank you, and with that, I don't intend to talk to you again. Thank you.
Supervisor Gleason?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple things I took that I thought were noteworthy. First one is your remark, Mr. Pope, about the consolidation of departments, and now you have the wherewithal to take action where before we were not capable of doing that. I appreciate that, and thank you for those comments, and I'm thankful you're in charge of that department. Second thing is 2 things that Mr. Farr talked about. First one was posting AECOM's staff findings. Mr. Fenton, do you have any thoughts about that?
Supervisor Gleason, through the chair, yeah, after we get through reviewing the draft that was submitted to us, we've already identified a couple things that need to be tweaked, but we will put that on our website and make it available prior to bringing anything to your board, if so desired.
Thank you. The effort here is public awareness of what's going on, for good or bad.
Certainly.
And just getting them involved. The second thing is town hall meetings. I think one of Mr. Farr's earlier comments talked about town hall, suggesting town hall meetings. Mr. Pope, what do you think about that?
I think public awareness is always a good thing, and we're just trying to develop and formulate a plan that we could bring forward, and get some direction that we could share with the public before we did so, but we intend to do that.
Thank you, sir. I'm done.
Supervisor Couch?
Well, we were called racist this morning and rapists this afternoon. Who knows what's going to happen next week? But I don't say this in response to Mr. Farr. I say this for the general public. I'm excited about the work that we have done recently with Caliente Creek and the prospects for a project out there that would be a benefit to the region, the basin, tie in with our Sigma efforts. So I hope we're able to continue that. Mr. Farr may not know about that. That's neither here nor there. It doesn't matter if he knows about it or not, but I think it's important for the public to know that the board, the staff are working on that particular problem in a broader context than maybe what we heard about today. And so I appreciate your efforts. I want to help you as however I can in that regard going forward. I don't see any other lights. I see Supervisor Perez wants to speak, so I'll stop it there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Perez?
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Farr, thank you for continually pushing and continually fighting for community in Lamont. I think your passion is authentic. I think your criticism of this county extends decades to a time in which no one on this dais was here. However, we are here now, and I appreciate who you are and that you care so much and the expertise that you bring. With that said, I am excited also about the prospects of working with our farming community. We have had very open, difficult discussions with many, many stakeholders that we have to take aggressive action. It has been very difficult to do so for a whole host of reasons, none of which I understand are suitable to you, and I don't blame you nor disagree with you. But I think we're in a new era in this issue. I'm excited about the many relationships that we can leverage today as part of the solution gathering process. And I would like to say to you, keep pushing, as a squeaky wheel gets some oil usually. And I think you're seeing some of that. So hats off to you. We will not agree on everything. That's an impossibility. But I do think that our joint passion and collaboration will get us to where we need to be. So thank you. And I'm sure I'll hear from you again. That's my suspicion. But thank you. With that, I'll move staff's recommendation or to take under consideration the staff report.
Okay, we have a motion on staff's recommendation.
Second.
Please cast your votes.
Motion is approved, all ayes.
Thank you. And next item on our agenda is item number 19. However, we're going to hear items 19 through 23 concurrently, but we will vote on them separately. These items all have to do with the new state Groundwater Sustainability Act. So I will ask our county administrative office to kick this off. Mr. Alsop, is that going to be you, or is it Mr. Christensen?
That'll be Mr. Christensen. Thank you.
Okay, Alan Christensen. All right, good afternoon.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Yes, items 19 through 23 all are related to groundwater management in the county. In all of these items, they involve partnerships with government agencies, including water districts, water storage districts, and even other counties. The Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, or SGMA, requires that all critically overdrafted basins form or create a GSA or GSAs to entirely cover the basin in question, and that needs to be done by June 30th of 2017. So that process has begun in earnest. There will be You will consider some items today. In a couple of weeks, you'll see some more. Many of these water districts and counties and water storage districts are doing similar actions with their boards. These agreements concern 3 critically overdrafted basins in the county. My staff report today will address them all together. You have a map, physical map before you, and we have one on screen that identifies the southern end of the San Joaquin Valley. And let me just give a big picture overview of this map. It is, thank you. It is the red line around around the edges is what we call a basin boundary line. It's not. It is a hydrogeologic line that was issued many years ago, but updated last year, and so that's for the Kern County subbasin. The colors you see in there are different water districts or conglomerations of water districts now formed as GSAs that have applied to DWR, the Department of Water Resources, or plan to file with the Department of Water Resources to become a groundwater sustainability agency. The other areas, you can see some shaded areas with other districts. Some of those have decided to join to be a GSA as a group, or they have plans to do individual filings with the state to be a GSA. The purely white areas are the areas that most of which the county will be responsible for. So for the public's benefit, I know the board is well aware of this, the concept, but for the public's benefit, the white areas would be the county's areas. There are some exceptions to that coming forward, but let me start with one basin. It's the first item, number 19. It's the Kiama Basin Groundwater Sustainability Agency. It's a joint powers agreement. Now, that basin is not on your map here, but if you can follow my cursor, it's right down here in this area. The actual basin is large, and Kern County has a very small, unfarmed, undeveloped part of that basin, but is nevertheless part of the basin. So we've negotiated and discussed that a joint powers agreement with 6 other public agencies. Those include, in that basin, those include the Kiama Basin Water District, the Kiama Community Services District, the County of Kern, County of San Luis Obispo, the Santa Barbara County Water Agency, and the County of Ventura. These jurisdictions have come together to form a JPA and to eventually serve as the JPA for the groundwater basin there. The Groundwater Authority will implement and comply with SGMA in that basin. They will develop and adopt and implement a groundwater sustainability plan for the basin. The authority, when formed, shall possess the power to exercise any and all common powers of its members necessary to implement the purposes of SGMA. There will be a board of directors. A total of 11 directors will govern that board for the Kiama JPA. Kern County has one seat on that, one voting seat on that Joint Powers Authority board. The agreement has lots of details, but the big picture is that if at a future date any of the members would like to withdraw from the agreement, they can do so upon 60 days written notice. The fiscal impact of joining this Joint Powers Authority is unknown at this time. Thus far, the local water districts are absorbing the costs of GSA formation, meetings, notices, and so forth, and including filing fees to the State Department of Water Resources. Any questions about Kiama? The next one is the Coelho Kern Groundwater Sustainability Agency, and I will, if you'll follow my cursor, it's up in the right-hand corner. The Coelho Water District is where I'm circling, and then to the right, all that white area would be included. So if you ran a straight line across where my cursor is showing, then you would, that would be the top of it, and it would have all that area in between, on the west from Coelho and on the east where the red line is. Coelho is, again, a joint powers authority agreement. And it would combine the Coelho Water District with the white areas to the east. The authority will be governed and administered by a board which shall be composed of the Board of Directors of Coelho only. Kern County is a party to the agreement, but is a non-voting member of that JPA. Our role would be to monitor groundwater management activities and to provide input and assistance where needed. The advantage of this agreement is the county can use Coelho's technical resources, which we currently lack at this time, to manage that area. There's no fiscal impact associated with this membership in this joint powers agreement. The county is not obligated to make payments for any activity or tasks undertaken by them. Coelho agrees to indemnify, defend, and hold harmless the county, its officers and directors and so forth, and including in that litigation costs and attorney's fees arising from any actions taken in that joint powers area. The JPA agreement will shield the county's general fund from costs associated with litigation or activities of the JPA. It's also intended that costs of the operations, activities, and litigation, and all expenses and revenues, if there are shortfalls to revenue over expenses, that JPA would assess property owners for the cost of groundwater management in that area. Any questions about Coelho? The next is the White Wolf subbasin, and this is very clearly shown on the map. The blue area, a little section at the bottom of this map, in blue, and then there's a red line running right through it, makes up the White Wolf Basin. That basin was just created upon an application by the water districts in that area, and DWR approved that, so now they are a separate basin. They are considered an overdraft, so thus the Sigma law applies to them. It is a joint powers agreement that is very similar to the Coelho, the only difference being that there are 4 members of that JPA. That includes the ones you see there, Wheeler Ridge, Maricopa, Arvin Edison Water Storage District, Tahone Castac, and then the county. Again, we have some white areas. You can see the white areas around the edges and near the blue line. In this joint powers arrangement, the Kern County will have 1 non-voting board member on the JPA. Again, the language is very similar with regard to indemnity. There's no fiscal impact associated with membership in this JPA, so we plan that there will be no impact on the general fund. Any questions on White Wolf? This is the last joint powers agreement. This is the joint JPA for the Kern Groundwater Authority. Now, if you go back to the map here, much of the area that is not colored will be part of the Kern Groundwater Authority. We don't know exactly what will make that up because not all the agencies have approved this agreement. The KGA was formed in 2014 with 19 original members, including Kern County. The goal of the KGA is to achieve long-term sustainability for the Kern County subbasin. So again, the area with the red outline is the Kern County subbasin. The top, the squiggly line around the edges is the actual basin. The straight line across the top is a political boundary, and but that is not a hydrogeologic boundary. The county's role in the KGA is to represent areas of the Kern County subbasin that do not belong to a water district. Again, we call that the white areas, as defined in SGMA. The county's chosen to take responsibility for these undistricted or white areas as a member of the KGA. The white areas are comprised of land area patches throughout the southern San Joaquin Valley. Many of them are not contiguous to each other. The total acreage of land in the white areas of the Kern County subbasin is approximately 440,000 acres. It could be somewhat less than that depending on how many filings occur, and that is still in flux and changing, but we will know by June 30th for the most part. Of that 440,000 acres, we estimate that only 25,000 acres have some form of agriculture associated with them that we're using or might use groundwater. The KGA serves as a coordinating and administrative role in order to provide for sustainable groundwater management throughout the subbasin. To date, we have shared in some of those costs. We estimate that going forward, an additional $78,000 in the coming year would be are estimated to be our proportion of the costs associated with membership in the KGA. This is the third version of the JPA with the KGA. The changes to the agreement are somewhat minor, don't have any real significant impact to the county. As I said, other members of the KGA have approved this agreement. Others still have yet to. This agreement is necessary to the KGA filing in the coming weeks to be a GSA for that area. Again, it will be made up of many of the districts you see here in the map. North Kern, Shafter Wasco Irrigation District, Lost Hills, Brenda Mesa, Wheeler Ridge, a portion that's in the basin would be part of the KGA, Arvin Edison, and so forth. There are some exceptions, but you get the picture. And then included in that would be most of the white area. The goal here is to make sure that the basin is covered. We want the basin covered because the state has said that areas that are not covered by the entire basin is not covered. Those areas could cause the basin to go into probation, and the state could come in and take over those, manage them, and it is our belief that would not be inexpensive, nor would it be a good alternative. So our goal is to have the entire area covered in as much as we can. Any questions about the JPA? The last agreement you have is really very simple. It's a special activity agreement that all the members of the Kern Groundwater Authority, or KGA, are asked to agree to. It is connected with the Joint Powers Agreement. It is directly related to filing as a GSA, again, with the Department of Water Resources. With that ends my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions or point any things out on the map that you have questions about.
Okay. Mr. Christensen, thank you very much. I'll ask if there are any members of the audience who would like to make comment on items 19 through 23. Okay, seeing none, I'll return to the board. Supervisor Gleason.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good report, Alan. Thank you very much. So what you're saying today is I see 5 GSAs that we're talking about, or is it 4 and a special agreement?
Yes, four GSAs, and the 5th is to file a GSA for the KGA.
And how many total GSAs are going to be in the Kern County subbasin?
at least, we don't know for sure yet. 7 or 8 minimum.
Okay, thank you, sir. How confident are you of the state's determination if we were to not file over these white spaces, white areas, to regulate the groundwater in Kern County?
Through the chair, Supervisor Gleason, I'm pretty confident, given the reality of, we are the sort of the poster child of groundwater challenges in the state. Just because of the size of agriculture, the use of water, and so forth. Not because we're worse than anybody else or have behaved poorly, but I have no doubt that they will do. If someone is not complying, they will move to take over whatever they need to. I will say this, that they have said that they'll give us every opportunity, even up to the deadline or even a little bit after, but they would go right into public hearings and start assessing and require reporting of wells. That's kind of the challenging one, is that we'd be subject to well data reporting to the state, which I don't even know how that would be accomplished. So, yes, I'm very, very confident they would move.
I think that we're going to be subject to well data reporting regardless of whether the state takes over or not. In order to create a water budget, you have to know what's coming in and you have to know what's going out. You and I have made several trips to Sacramento discussing this with the Department of Water Resources and the State Water Board, and I agree with your comments that the state is bound and determined to enforce this new law. They've changed their locations, they've changed their setups. We have verbal commitments from the director of the EPA, California EPA, Mr. Burns, that he is that his focus is on the success of the Sigma program. So I have no doubt that the state is going to come in and manage and control groundwater in the state of California. And the GSA structure that they've set up is they're offering to us to do the best we can to shape our water usage and our economies and our culture and manage those as close to the local level as possible. But barring our success, they're going to enforce water law, new water laws. Thank you, Mr. Christensen.
Supervisor Couch.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you to Alan and Mr. Core and anyone else that's been involved in this, probably Phil, Mr. Hall. I think these are the appropriate steps for us to take, and we need to do them pretty quickly. We've got a deadline coming up. So do you need a motion, separate motion for each one of those? Can you get one motion?
Separate, I believe.
Yeah, it's separate motions. We need to vote separately on each one.
Sorry, what's the first item, number
19 through 23.
First
So-
is Kuyama is number 19.
So I'll make a motion on staff's recommendation on item 19.
Second.
Please cast your votes.
The motion is approved, all ayes.
Same motion on 20.
Yes, please.
Second.
Please cast your votes on number 20.
Sorry, the motion is approved, all ayes.
Move approval of 21.
Second.
Please cast your votes.
Motion approved, all ayes.
Move approval of 22.
Second.
Please cast your votes.
Motion is approved, all ayes.
And move staff's recommendation on item 23 as well.
Second.
Please cast your votes.
Motion is approved, all ayes.
Thank you. And that brings us to item 31 under the County Administrative Office, Human Resources Division. Item 31 is a request to declare impasse in bargaining over successor Memorandum of Understanding with Kern County Detention Officers Association and request to submit impasse to mediation. And I'll ask Devin Brown from the Human Resources Division to start us off on this discussion. Mr. Brown?
Good afternoon,
afternoon.
Chairman, Scrivener, and members of the board. The first item from the Human Resources Division today before you is a request to declare impasse in bargaining over the successor MOU negotiations with the Kern County Detention Officers Association and a request to submit the impasse to mediation. On March 13, 2015, the county's MOU with the Kern County Detention Officers Association expired. The County Administrative Office and KCDOA have been engaged in successor MOU negotiations for several months, and those negotiations began in earnest on May of 2016. At the parties' last several meetings, we've reached what we believe is an impasse in negotiations. On March 18, 2017, the county provided the Kern County Detention Officers with its last, best, and final offer. And then at our subsequent meeting over a month later, the Detention Officers Association responded with its last, best, and final offer. And both sides have effectively rejected those offers, and we believe have reached a point where further negotiation is not likely to result in an agreement. The county's employee-employer relations resolution that was adopted by your board requires that we bring the matter to your attention and itemize the continuing points of disagreement between the parties. And if your board feels that there is an impasse in the negotiations, your board has the pleasure to declare an impasse and submit the matter to mediation. Currently, the county and the Detention Officers Association have several points of disagreement on economic items. We have agreed tentatively to at least 9 non-economic changes to the current MOU, but the economic items are of significant consequence, and the parties are so far apart that we believe an impasse has been reached. Those items include the county's proposal to change the how overtime compensation is calculated for those employees who work more than 84 hours in a 14-day period. We have proposed, following the Auditor Controller's report this January, to include or exclude paid leave time and holidays from the total collection or calculation of hours worked, and KCDOA has not agreed to that proposal. Likewise, KCDOA has proposed a salary increase retroactive to September 3rd of 8%, and an F-step addition, which is a 6-step increment for all KCDOA employees, and an automatic increment advance for those employees who have been at E-step for over a year. The county is not in an economic position to, we believe, to agree to that proposal, and so we have rejected those 2 items. Additionally, they have requested to change the criteria to qualify for the retiree health premium supplement plan, reducing the requirement to only 20 years of service and eliminating the age requirement of 50 years. While most employees who have 20 years of service reach the 50 years age requirement, that plan allows a benefit to go to age 65. So if they're at age 50, they would get that benefit for 15 years. And reducing that age requirement, or eliminating it, could potentially expand the benefit beyond 15 years and increase the county's unfunded liability in that area. And additionally, the detention officers is requesting a 5% biweekly pay for all employees who may be subject to mandatory overtime to backfill vacancies caused by vacation, sick leave, and CTO. They've turned that an availability pay, but effectively that would apply to all of their employees working in the jail facilities. Additionally, we have one non-economic item which we haven't reached agreement, which is the language included in the MOU for shift bids, and the parties have not been able to reach an agreement on how that language should be worded. As your board is aware, the fiscal year 2017-2018 budget is currently being prepared by the county departments, including the sheriff's office, with the assistance of the County Administrative Office. And that preparation will be significantly impacted by the results of these negotiations and the resolution of any impasse that's declared by your board. We believe an impasse has been reached, and we were recommending that your board declare that an impasse has been reached in a negotiation over the successor Memorandum of Understanding with the Kern County Detention Officers Association, and we're requesting that you submit the matter to a mediator to resolve that impasse. Be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Are there any questions from members of the board? Okay, seeing none, I'll go to the public. I'll ask if there are any members of the audience who'd like to make comment on item 31. Okay, seeing none, I'll return to the board.
I'll jump in.
Supervisor Couch?
Thank you. Unfortunately, we may be here with several bargaining groups, but it's unfortunate we're here now, but I'll make a motion on the staff's recommendation. Thanks.
You have a motion. Do you have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please cast your votes.
The motion is approved. All ayes.
Thank you. Now, item 32 is a request to declare impasse in bargaining over successor Memorandum of Understanding with Kern Law Enforcement Association and request to submit impasse to mediation. Mr. Brown, please.
Good afternoon again, Chairman Scrivener, members of the board. This item is similar to the previous item, except is for the Kern Law Enforcement Association. Again, that MOU with Kern Law Enforcement Association, also known as KLEA, expired March 13th of 2015. The County Administrative Office and KLEA have been engaged in successor MOU negotiations since February of 2016. We've met several times. We've been working very diligently to try to reach an agreement that both parties can accept. And we've even tentatively agreed to over 40 items or changes in their MOU language. But we believe, again, that the parties are at an impasse over the final contract agreement due to the economic items that each party are proposing. At the party's last bargaining session, which was April 27th, 2017, both the county and KLEA provided each other with their last best and final offers, and both sides have rejected those offers. And again, we believe we've reached a point where further negotiation is not likely to result in an agreement. As I stated earlier, the county's employer-employee relations resolution requires that we bring this matter to your board to determine whether an impasse should be declared, and if so, to submit the matter to mediation. The continuing points of disagreement between the parties can be summarized as follows. The remaining county economic proposal relates to overtime compensation and the exclusion of paid leave time and holidays from the total calculation of hours worked for overtime eligibility. KLEA has rejected that proposal item. KLEA is proposing to increase the certificate pay by 2% for all members to a total of from 12% of certificate pay to up to 14% certificate pay. That impacts a majority of KLEA's members and creates a financial impact that we can't recommend your board agree to. They're also requesting exclusions from the county's proposal to exclude paid leave time. They would like the hours worked not to include or to include holiday time, vacation time, emergency callouts, and holdovers to meet minimum staffing requirements. They've also proposed to reduce what they currently have is a 2% longevity pay for 30 years of service, and they would like to reduce that to 20 years so that employees, when they reach 20 years of service, become eligible for that 2% longevity. The grievance process currently is an advisory arbitration, and KLEA has proposed to change that to binding arbitration. We believe that these two proposals that the county and the KLEA have proposed to each other on April 27th are closer than the previous group that we discussed, but still far enough apart that we believe that we're at an impasse and that mediation should be ordered by your board. As you're aware, the fiscal year 2017-2018 budget will be impacted by any changes resolved through these negotiations and/or impasse resolution, and the sheriff's office is anticipated to meet its 3.5% reduction in net general fund costs as a result of the negotiations, and so we believe it's important that we get to mediation and any potential other resolution procedures following that as soon as possible to see if we can't reach an agreement with this bargaining group. Therefore, it is recommended that your board declare an impasse has been reached in the negotiation over the successor Memorandum of Understanding with Kern Law Enforcement Association and to direct us to submit the matter to mediation. I'd be happy to answer any more questions. And
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brown. Are there any questions from members of the board before I go to the public? Okay, seeing none, I'll ask if there are any members of the audience who would like to make comment on this item. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Sheriff Donnie Youngblood. I'm here to speak a little bit on item 30 and 31 combined. I am not here to speak about the impasse or the intricacies of what is being negotiated, but I want to reiterate what I've said to each of you and the CAO in person so that the public can hear. We just graduated an Academy of Detention Deputies, and we currently have an Academy of 47 of deputy sheriffs that are, I think, in week 3 or 4. But over the last several years, these officers have not received pay raises. These officers, we've lost, we're down double digits in detentions, which is a different animal than KLEA. In detentions, they work fixed post, and when someone calls in sick or takes vacation on fixed post, if you get to the minimum staffing level, you have to work overtime. And if you could picture yourself working 12-hour shifts or 10-hour shifts, and you come in on a day that you didn't sleep well the night before, and right toward the end of this shift, the sergeant says, by the way, I need you to stick around for 10 more hours. That's very difficult to do. I've done it in my career. It's very taxing. They're on forced overtime and have been for several years in both of the associations. That is not sustainable over the long run. As we know, it's going to take a toll on these officers, and we're going to pay at the end if they make it 20 years or however long they make it before they leave service on a disability. So this is we can pay now or we can pay later, and I realize the financial position that we're in. I'm in a position of fighting for a budget, not for fighting for pay raises, but they're combined. They actually are relative to each other, very much so. I just received notice yesterday from another deputy sheriff who has been here for 9 years, thanking me for the 9 years and what we've done for him, but he was off to Santa Ana where he was going to make $100,000 a year. Fresno City offers $10,000 just to sign on the dotted line and come to work. And the reason they do that is because they're down 20 positions. Well, as you well know, in both associations, we're much worse than that. We've gotten ourselves into a position that if we had all the money we needed, we're 3 to 4 years away from getting back to being healthy because of the time it takes to put people through an academy, through field training, and to put them in service. Meantime, you lose people. So I just wanted to say to you in public that at some point, we have to look at getting our deputies in comparison financially with other cities or counties, or we're going to continue to train people and continually watch them go to other agencies, and that's a huge loss for us, a huge financial loss. So with that, I thank you very much.
Sheriff Youngblood, I think Supervisor Gleason has a question.
Sheriff?
Yes, sir.
Thanks for coming up, and thanks for all the work you do representing us and leading your team. I remember clearly you're coming into my office and saying, well, the first thing that came out of your mouth was, these guys need a raise. And what was the first thing that came out of my mouth?
You agreed.
100%. There's no doubt about it. I hear you. I appreciate it. I'd like to talk about the academy. You got funded. You brought up that topic about the academy. Now we're moving through this academy. We're expecting graduation when? You off the top of your head?
You know the date?
September timeframe, and you'll graduate some X number, and then the point of that is to get some folks back up into on the patrol and to refurbish get those guys back up into the walking the street thing, and then you're going to immediately, if the budget goes according to plan, hopefully we'll get another academy if we can do that, if that's possible, and that will also help. My thought, and I'd like to hear your comment on this, there's two issues at stake here. One is a pay that is commensurate with what other places are going, and the other issue is retention. Could you talk to me about each one of those and how they're different, or are they different, and in what ways we could work each of those that maybe we're not doing now?
Well, there are things that we've looked at when it comes to retention, but in the state of California, once you've gone through an academy, got a basic certificate, you can laterally transfer any place in the state of California to another law enforcement agency. In KLEA, we've lost about 50 in the last 2 years to other agencies, meaning they weren't ready for retirement, but they got a better offer, at least in their minds, to go to other agencies, to include Shafter Police Department, to include the Kern High School District. We're losing to local agencies that are smaller that we've never lost officers to before. Historically, we have taken officers from other agencies lateral. We don't get laterals any longer. I think we may have had one during this period where we've lost about 50, give or take. And so when you can't retain them, you can recruit because you hire people to go through the academy and pay them while they're in the academy. But some of them, we know, are already looking to where they really want to go. And so we're used as a training academy, and quite frankly, we have one of the best training academies in the state of California, and Post appreciates that. But if we can't keep them, if we can't retain them, we're really spending a lot of money that we're throwing away. But we can't quit. We can't just stop, because I have places throughout this county where Deputy Sheriff responds to the call at 3 o'clock in the morning by himself or herself in places that we shouldn't expect them to do that. The same issue at detentions. If you don't think that's a hard beat to walk, go out there sometimes and see what they have to go through. Every night we have people in cells where they spread feces over the walls, and we have to clean that up, and it's a tough beat to walk. So this retention issue is real. As we get smaller now, when someone leaves our agency and say they work in the Roseman substation, I have nobody to backfill that position with. I've moved everybody around as much as I can. Metro Patrol, I think, is at 55. In the 90s, when I was a patrol commander, I fielded over 80 deputy sheriffs. It's a totally different environment out there. It's violent. Our population's almost doubled. This is really catastrophic as far as I'm concerned. And I'm doing the best that I can just to evenly spread what we have, but it's not fair to the public, and it's not fair to these officers who give us 100%.
My last question is, I want to thank you for the help you're giving and what you're going through to help us develop a budget for this upcoming year that is going to be as seamless to service delivery as possible. We're trying to minimize service level impacts, and so that the public gets at least the same they've been getting and no reductions, and that has not been easy. Would you like to comment on the proposal that that we're having with the union about changes to the calculus of overtime and how we can affect the budget requirements that are real, that we're all facing the horror of that, with and managing that such an important department as the Sheriff's Department?
I appreciate your question, but I want to be very cautious that I don't interfere with the negotiation process between our county negotiators and the unions who do very well at that negotiating process. So I'm not in those negotiations, and quite frankly, I don't want to be in them.
Thanks, Sheriff, appreciate it. Thanks, I'm done, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks.
Thank you. Do we have any other folks that would like to make a comment on this item? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Chairman Scrivener, members of the board, Sergeant David Kessler, President of Kern Law Enforcement Association. KLEA represents about 500 deputy sheriffs in Kern County, as well as investigators for the district attorney's office. As you know, the men and women who enter into a career of law enforcement have a strong desire to protect the community, keep our family, friends, neighbors, businesses safe from those who commit crimes and endanger lives and livelihoods of our citizens. As you may also know, the Sheriff's Department is currently severely understaffed. We struggle to attract enough officers to join our career. We've had approximately 168 deputies leave the Sheriff's Office over the past 3 years. Many of these officers continue to leave for better paying jurisdictions, both in and outside Kern County. The county negotiators acknowledge that KLEA members are paid significantly less than peace officers employed by the city of Bakersfield and other neighboring agencies. It's frustrating that the county is considering declaring an impasse while our men and women in uniform continue to work long hours without a contract to cover the severe understaffing, usually without backup for many miles. Serving a county as vast as Kern, while crime rates are at a disturbingly high level, is incredibly challenging for our officers and is not providing the optimal protection for the public. Our deputies in Kern County are discouraged with the working conditions and the perceived lack of support from the county administration, while we continually hear frustration from the public over the rising crime rates. KLEA has sought to find a reasonable compromise with the county throughout negotiations. At one point, both sides agreed to a short-term contract, only to learn the board voted to reject it. The contract was consistent with other agreements reached with other associations and did not contain any wage increases. KLEA is willing to partner with the county in an effort to address the county's budget issues. KLEA has nonetheless returned to the bargaining table after that rejection and again sought to work with the county. But now, more than 2 years after the contract expired, KLEA merely sought to maintain the existing pay and benefit levels while requesting a 2% increase for employees who possess certain training certificates. That proposal would not address the market disparity that currently exists in the pay levels for KLEA members and wouldn't even keep up with the cost of living increases that have occurred over the past 2 years. That proposal was entirely reasonable in light of the concessions sought by the county that will force KLEA members to work overtime hours, avoid taking vacations and other time off, and not even get the overtime compensation provided by the party's last contract. The sheriff's office is on life support. We do not have the resources to handle the issues facing our citizens without making our members work long hours. Not only does this put the public at risk, but also our members. By proceeding with this process, more deputies will be leaving and will force others to start looking for employment elsewhere. I encourage you to reject the impasse and provide Devin Brown with the authority to reach a compromise on the unresolved issues that will not push more KLEA members to leave for better pay and give the citizens the protection they need. Our officers fully understand the state of the economy and the challenges that our business community is facing. What we don't see from the county administration is a high priority placed on what's the most fundamental duty of government, to protect its citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kessler. Are there any other comments from members of the public?
Good afternoon, guys. I am Nicole Beninati, and I'm a resident of the Kern Valley area, Lake Isabella. I have recently been meeting with community members. One meeting comes to mind, a neighborhood watch group of 25 senior citizens. I've just recently sat in that meeting where they are fully armed and confronting the criminals that trespass into their private neighborhood. That is the stance that they have taken against the crime that is happening in our valley. To the point that they have set up an armed neighborhood safety group to protect themselves and their neighborhoods. You are now asking that our law enforcement work overtime without the pay that they deserve. I have to ask the board, have you taken the same financial hits that our departments have taken? Are our safety boards paying the same price that you guys are paying? Are all of you getting the raises that they have not received since at least 2009? They have not had a cost of living raise. So my concern is when we talk about this budget that's going on in our county and how we don't have the funding to support the most valuable department in our community, how a board sits in front of and says, I don't know where that money is. I don't know how to compensate for these issues. I'm sitting at a desk negotiating issues for men that are putting their lives on the line daily against criminals, but they're not being reasonable. Our department is so understaffed and so under-budgeted that we are nearly 21% underpaid compared to other community law enforcement agencies. Is there any explanation for why we're asking our law enforcement to go out there every single day and risk their lives for not just me, you guys sitting up here, your families are all being protected by the same law enforcement. I have personally watched law enforcement agencies, personnel not come home to their wives and children. I have watched the devastation of all of that. I've always had to live in fear that my own family member wasn't coming home from work. I wonder if your wives and children are in constant fear that you won't come home today, that you will be sacrificed for what you're doing on your job. So what I'm asking the county to do and the board to do is to take serious consideration into some of these negotiations that you're asking for and who's really paying the price for those. Because we as a community do not deserve to be standing in a street protecting ourselves. We do not deserve to have our senior citizens feared, being fearful of the consequences of not having protection coming fast enough. And we certainly do not have the right to ask any individual to go into the street and sacrifice their mental stability, their life, and their well-being to protect us while we say, you don't even qualify for a living that surpasses being on the welfare system. I have personally talked to officers in my area that are just hitting that limit. There is no explanation on why our law enforcement is looking at the possibility beyond being on a public assistant program, doing the job that they're doing. So that is all I have to say.
Could you please spell your last name for the record?
Yes,
Thank
it's
you.
B-E-N-E-N-A-T-I.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good afternoon, board members. And Chairman, how are you today, sir?
Doing well, thank you.
Thank you. I just had to read a brief note here. Obviously, due to the public safety cuts, citizens are realizing...
Sir, would you please state your name?
Oh, yes, sir. Darius, D-A-U-R-E-S, Stevens, S-T-E-P-H-E-N-S.
Thank you.
Okay. Obviously, due to public safety cuts, citizens are realizing that they have a higher possibility of being a victim of crime. Many are preparing to defend themselves and their home. With that said, there are persons in our communities that deserve special consideration and protection. That group is our senior citizens. They have earned the right to be secure in their homes. Sadly, many are not. I have direct knowledge of this, for I'm a retired senior deputy sheriff for Kern County. I've investigated many crimes where the seniors were victims of mental, physical, and financial abuse. Towards the end of my career, I was dispatched to a call where I was able to stop a drunk that was advancing towards a female senior citizen. The offender had an axe in one hand and a ball bat in the other. The offender was arrested, and he ultimately was sent to prison. I feared that with staffing of the Sheriff's Department today, the outcome would have been different. I'm asking the board to review Penal Code 368. That's regarding elder abuse. That's where you will find the words, special consideration and protection toward this group of people. I do not believe it was I that protected that gal. It was a staffed department in 2011 that caused her to, prevented her from being killed or seriously injured. This is serious concerns for the senior citizens up there. That's a large portion of our community. It's just the way it is. And if we can't protect our seniors, board members, who can we protect? Thank you.
How many more speakers do we have today? Two more after you? Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chair Scrivener and the board members. My name is Tim Talbot. I'm an attorney. I represent the Kern Law Enforcement Association. I'm addressing you here just to put a finer point on what you're considering today. It needs to be noted that under your current procedures, this body has the ability to determine whether the parties are actually at an impasse. And an impasse can be broken by the action of this board by giving its labor relations consultant or representative some authority to move from a position. We're only here today because the county rejected an agreement that the parties reached earlier in the year that would have stabilized the costs for the county going through into the next fiscal year. As a result of that, the county came back to us and proposed to make cuts. Only in response to those proposals do you see the nominal wage increases that were put on the table to try to match that. Had the county not come with those cuts, we wouldn't even be here asking for that little nominal amount of money. We are here because of that action. With respect to the overtime thing, I think you have to understand the nuance here. The nuance is that we currently have deputies in patrol that work a 40-hour work week, the standard notion of what it is to work 40 hours and then get overtime. The county's proposal for those individuals seeks to make that an 80-hour period, such that you would not be entitled to overtime until you work 80 hours. Actually work. Now, you heard the sheriff and others comment on how many positions were down. It is not these deputies' faults that they are required to work that overtime. It is a direct consequence of the staffing situation or crisis that we have here. So think that through. The sheriff made mention of having to force people. People will be mandated to work overtime. People will step up and have stepped up in this organization to work overtime to meet the needs of this community and law enforcement. They will do it tomorrow. They will do it next week. They will do it time and time again. But the county's proposal punishes them for doing it. And how does it punish them? Because currently now, if they absolutely need a break, I need a day off because I haven't had a day off in 6 months. If I take that day off on a Monday, under the county's current proposal, they could force me to work an overtime shift the following week, and I would get paid straight time for that. I would not get time and a half. Why? Because I took a day off in the prior week and didn't actually work. Now, you want to talk about a morale buster? You want to talk about people feeling demoralized for stepping up and doing the job? That proposal does it. You want to know why this body is opposed to that? Because when you talk about a situation where we're close to 20% under, and we're certainly double digits or close to that just within this county under pay, when you ask them to step up and fill those gaps and then tell them they're going to do it for straight time compensation, when before they could at least count on getting time and a half if they took some time off, much needed time off, you give them absolutely no reason to stay. And there aren't too many other reasons for them to stay as it is. And I've challenged the county to stand in my shoes in front of this membership and say, what should I tell the men and women of the Kern Law Enforcement Association, what they should look forward to for a career here? And there isn't anything. So this is insult to injury when they were willing to take no pay increases to help the county maintain that budget through at least September of this year, and it was basically just pushed back in their faces. So that's why we're here. And you have the ability, really it is this body, has the ability to change that outcome. Give them the direction to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Who'll be next, please?
Kevin Kimmel, Kimmel, detective with Kern County Sheriff's Office, Robbery Homicide Division. I have severe opposition against this FSLA overtime rule in that if we are called out in the middle of the night on a weeknight where we've worked our 10-hour shift and we get a homicide call out at 5 or 6 in the afternoon or evening, then we go out and we handle that. By the time we get back, we need to go home and get some sleep. Well, we're mandated to go home and take 8 hours or 10 hours of vacation. We don't have a choice to stay. We have to go home. We have to get sleep. Then we're mandated. So then when we come back to do our reports, because now we're on a time crunch, we've arrested somebody, we're on a time crunch with the DA's office that we only have a 48-hour period to get our reports done in, we are not compensated for that. It is not my choice. And I believe mandating or forcing us to do something is just wrong. When we are forced to go home and then holding it against us to come back and do our job and not paying us or compensating for us for that, and I think it's wrong. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other speakers? I believe this is our final speaker. Is there anyone else that would like to make comment? Okay, thank you. So you'll be our last one, sir.
Yes, sir. Richard Anderson, R-I-C-H-A-R-D, Anderson, A-N-D-E-R-S-O-N. I'm currently assigned to robbery homicide with the Kern County Sheriff's Office. I've been with the Sheriff's Office approximately 18 years. A lot of the things that my partner just spoke about, I feel passionately about too. I make myself and the fellow officers I work with make lots of sacrifices. I don't do this for the money. I do it to help support my family, and I'm noticing that it's getting harder and harder to do that. I've been with the department 18 years. You're looking at somebody who never would have thought about leaving Kern County or the Kern County Sheriff's Office. But after today and what I've seen the last 4 years, I'm thinking about leaving. I don't want to be here anymore, especially when we don't even ask for a raise. Status quo will keep things the same. We understand you guys have a difficult job and that there is money issues within the county because of the oil crisis. But some things, I think, my personal opinion is our priorities are a little messed up. I know as a homicide detective, I can't even find bodies to help me with homicides, active homicides. 14 kids get shot and I'm the only one working it. And I don't hear an outrage. I don't hear anything from the public. I don't hear anything from the Board of Supervisors. Nothing. You know, I'm frustrated as an officer because I see the community I grew up in falling apart. You guys impose this, and I guarantee you there will be a mass exodus. All right? There will be at least 30 to 40 officers that leave and not come back, me being one. And it's upsetting because I've seen a lot of men and women who I worked with for a lot of years leave. And I'll ask them, how are you doing? I'm happy. I'm glad I left, which upsets me because those are good officers that we're losing. People with a lot of experience. I don't think you can replace an 18-year veteran. I've put myself through a lot of training where I've paid for it, not what the county's paid for. But I imagine if you pulled my training orders, it would be tens of thousands of dollars you have invested in me. Do you want me to go somewhere else so I can make more money? I really don't want to do that. But then again, I see these young deputies who are bringing home $550 a week. Where do you live in Bakersfield for that? I mean, I don't know. I couldn't live on that. And that's what we're asking these men and women to do. And then take on more and more responsibility every year. The laws change every year. The workload in the last 18 years for a normal patrol deputy, has increased at least 30 to 40%. They're asked to do more and more and more. And they should be compensated a little bit. It's really all I have to say about it. So anyways, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your time, for your comments. Okay, do we have any other speakers?
My name is Cassie Fernandez. I'm a deputy sheriff assigned to the Lamont substation. I saw Supervisor Perez's reaction to what the pay is, and I would just like to speak on that. Sorry, I'm nervous. Thank you. I put myself through the academy. I paid my own way. It was a passion of mine. I knew that that was what I wanted to do to help people in our community. I sound like I'm going to cry. I'm not going to. I knew that this was the only way that I could be an effective helper in my community, and I was told get an education and do what you love, and so I chose law enforcement. I've finished my master's degree. My compensation for that is kind of an embarrassment. When I did my exit exam, it told me to get a better job. I was disappointed, but I certainly won't. I can hardly afford to pay my financial aid. The government has reduced the amount that I have to pay by $800 per month because my compensation for my job is so low. When I first came home, I brought home $864 for 2 weeks working while I was commuting and raising 2 children. It's pretty pathetic to raise my family on and to put my life in danger. During that time, I got cut in the jail by a woman carrying razor blades. I was attacked, spit on. So I thought, what am I doing this for? But it's a calling. And I can promise you that I won't leave Kern County, that I'm committed to the work that I do in prevention and intervention for our department. But I'm absolutely, we're at your mercy. And it's very disheartening. You spoke to morale, Supervisor Gleason. I don't know how you could expect people to have morale who weren't paid anywhere near their fair wage. So aside from that, that doesn't get me down. I'm able to put food on the table, but the work that I do is important, and at this time I'm not able to do that work because I've been reassigned, and I'm grateful for that assignment. I'm grateful for all the work I get to do in this department, but I believe that the children that I work with are suffering because of that. There won't be anyone assigned to that unit while I'm gone. And our prevention efforts, we know if you're just looking at it from a fiscal point of view, we can spend the money now or we can spend it later. So when I talked to recruits in the new academy, I was privileged to be on the oral interview panel. And we invite 88 to come out and interview, and we can only get 55 to even come and try. Because the first 33, even though they're qualified, they don't even want to try the physical exam. Then when you only have 55 to choose from and you fill up an academy, and they have all these opportunities where people in my academy went to the Bakersfield Police Department and made $500 more in that pay period. How can we ask them to stay? So I encourage you to retain the talent, and I can say that I'm definitely committed, and you have a group of extremely talented officers here who are committed, but we need your support, and it starts with you. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so that will conclude the public comment period. I'm going to return to the board. First, I'm going to ask, though, if Mr. Alsop or Mr. Brown would like to make any comments on any of the testimony that you heard from members of the public.
Yeah, I'm going to allow Devin to talk about it. He's been lead negotiator. I do want to acknowledge the sheriff and thank him for coming down, and he, in fact, has spoken quite a bit to me about his department and the need for salary increases. He's talked about working conditions. We've had those conversations, so I want to let his members know that he's had those conversations with me on several occasions. Yeah, I'll hand it over to Devin. Let him finish.
Thank you, Mr. Alsop. Mr. Brown.
Chairman Scribner, members of the board, I was listening intently to all the speakers today and acknowledge certainly their hard work and dedication to the law enforcement profession here in Kern County, and thank them for that. These negotiations have been long and fraught and difficult at times for both parties because both parties are trying immensely to reach an agreement. There was an agreement reached last November, as indicated by a couple of the speakers, largely status quo, although it did increase the sheriff's budget by about $200,000 annually because of some changes to the entry-level deputy classification. Following that period of time. The budget discussion began in earnest in January, and we were presented with a proposed guideline of a 3.5% reduction. And it was pretty clear, based on that information, that we couldn't move forward with that proposal as was agreed to. Additionally, the auditor controller, your independently elected auditor controller, provided your board with some information related to overtime and the extra costs that the county is absorbing because of its current MOU with not just this bargaining unit, but with all of the county employees. And so we re-engaged KLEA and some additional negotiations. The county has proposed some economic items to try to retain staff. We acknowledge that they don't go nearly as far as they probably should, but under our current economic conditions, we felt that those were as much as we could propose. I will say that the negotiation process, even if we've reached an impasse, and KLEA in a letter to the Public Employment Relations Board doesn't dispute that we've reached an impasse based on the current status of negotiations, that the negotiation process doesn't conclude. The parties are mandated by law to enter into impasse resolution procedures, including mediation and fact-finding in good faith, and try to resolve the impasse with impartial arbitrators and mediators. And so it's, our hope that certainly some of the items that were presented today, that the parties can resolve those and find a collective agreement. And so I do believe we are at impasse based on the status of negotiations, but certainly hope that the impasse resolution procedures of mediation and fact-finding will resolve the impasse, and we could bring a full agreement back to your board for adoption. And so it is our recommendation that your board do declare impasse and allow us to utilize those procedures and those impartial persons to hopefully resolve the remaining points of disagreement between the parties.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Alsop?
Yeah, I just want to follow up. This job ain't easy. Doing this, talking to the unions, whether it's sheriff or fire or DOA or whoever, it is not an easy thing to do. Our county is financially ill. We're sick. We have a financial problem that requires some rigorous sort of procedures be done. We need to keep our nose to the grindstone. We're in the second year of a 4-year mitigation plan that you outlined before I got here. We have a $41 million structural deficit in the county. That is a hole. That is a hole that exists unless oil comes up or we find ongoing real cuts that we're able to make each and every year going forward. If we continue to address the budget situation that we're in, with all things remaining equal with the economy, by addressing things with one-time revenues, pulling down from our reserves, financial reserves that we have for good reason, and things don't improve, we're only making our problems worse. We will be right back here next year having the same conversation with all these fine heroes that are in the audience. We'll have the same conversation. They will have the same budget problem. They will have the same retention problem and hiring problem and everything else. My goal as CAO in working with my colleague Devin here and in dealing with all of our bargaining units is to try and make some smart decisions that hopefully at the end of the day we can all agree to them. But smart decisions right now in order to take some big steps forward in terms of getting the sheriff to get having the ability to get his people more money, and all the things that they need. So it is not an easy job. I think, as Devin said, the mediation that we're going to be entering into could be very good, and we could find some resolution, hopefully, with folks. I don't know what it's like to lose somebody personally, but my wife does, and my 24-year-old daughter does. Their husband and her dad were killed in the line of duty here in Bakersfield many years ago, and I raised her. I raised his daughter. So, I get it. So my commitment as CAO is to work as hard as I possibly can with Devin, with your board, try and do everything that I can to make life better for our sheriff's deputies. And that is a priority of mine. If we had the ability to do that now, we would be doing it. Nobody wants to have this battle. Nobody. I don't enjoy this at all. So I just wanted to say that for the record. I wanted to say that to the public. I wanted to say that as a courtesy to the sheriff and all of his good employees that are here. I'm also looking forward to Thursday going on a ride-along with Deputy Ramos in East Kern. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alsop. I hope that, I know that there is true sincerity in the words that you spoke. I hope that has been conveyed and understood by the folks that are here speaking and other people that are listening. Sheriff Youngblood said it didn't used to be the case that we were losing deputies. There was a time when we were getting laterals. We used to compensate better than a lot of other agencies, and that hasn't been the case for a long time. And I know how all of you must react to hearing the same story from us up here when we talk about the price of oil and what it's meant. Right now, we're looking at the $41 million structural deficit. Before that, it was Kern Medical Center that was draining the county's coffers, and we were able to right that ship, fortunately. And then the second shoe dropped. Oil prices went down, first from $100 a barrel to $55, and then down to $35 in 2 subsequent years, which has never happened in anyone's memory in Kern County. And so this is a painful situation for us. We're not in the same, we don't walk in your shoes. We don't have the same job that you do. But this is not something that any of us enjoy. I went on a ride-along a couple of Fridays ago out in East Kern, out in the Rosamond, Mojave, Tehachapi area. And it had been 2 years since I had gone out to a ride-along in Rosamond. And when I went 2 years ago, it was a ride-along just in Rosamond, and there were probably about 8 deputies that were on duty there, and we were able to be proactive. We went out and did probation and parole visits. We were able to do some proactive things and then start running the calls in the evening. Now I went out there, and there are 4 or 5 people covering Tehachapi, Mojave, and Rosamond, and Boron in the evening, and that's not a sustainable situation. And the frustration and the fatigue is real, and it made a significant impression on me because of how much has changed just in the last couple of years. And so we hear you, and I wanted to try and emphasize that this isn't the end of the negotiations. This is the next step that I feel that we have to take, because I believe we are at impasse. But I don't want to make you any promises, because we don't know what next year is going to look like. We don't know what's going to happen with the price of oil, and so I'm not going to make any promises that we may not be able to keep. But I do want to emphasize that you are a major priority for us. We all recognize the dire situation that we're in when it comes to the retention and recruitment and our ability to staff our substations adequately. So I'll ask if there are any other members of the board that would like to make comment. Supervisor Perez.
Thank you. Thank you for coming here and conveying so eloquently and passionately what is happening within your ranks. Personally, it has taken me some time to get to where I am today because it's hard to know whether what you're hearing is actual, part of a larger campaign, what's true, what's not. That has been very difficult because we've had such drastic cuts in the county, and we've heard sort of a hellstorm from all of our employees. But I am totally and completely convinced that this department is in crisis. I would not have said that even 3 or 6 months ago, but I have had the privilege of listening to very heartfelt realities from several of you that are in the crowd today and some that are not here. And I am very, very concerned. I believe what you have said is true, and that the cost over the long term is one in which this county really cannot bear. And so I am very concerned. I am so sorry that this is your condition. I've seen the comparisons. I know how poorly you are compensated in relation to the rest of the state, and I think that is just disgraceful. That is not because anybody on this board does not love and value you. I truly believe that. This board is desperate to compensate you for what you're worth. I know that. I believe that. Your sheriff has made that pitch to us privately, one-on-one, and in closed session on numerous occasions. And I believe that he gets the crisis that is happening within your department. So as we move forward, I do not believe that this county is in a position to provide raises to all of its employees. I just don't believe that. I don't believe that I'll be convinced of that anytime in the near future. But I do believe that this department has to be prioritized over other departments. That is something that's going to get me in a lot of trouble for saying, because I like to think that we're all on the same page doing the same work. And I know how deeply committed to this county all of our employees are, and how much we love and rely upon them. But I am very concerned about your department. I believe you are in crisis. I didn't believe that a year ago, 6 months ago. I believe it now. And I strongly believe, and I know how my colleagues feel. They're concerned as well. It's a topic of conversation weekly for us. But I do believe that we're in a place now where we have to prioritize this department. Recruitment and retention, the cost over the long term is too great to bear, given what it means to morale and other issues that affect you. So with that said, I am very concerned about declaring impasse today. When I hear from people that I trust, truly trust, to be people of integrity, say that this is going to further damage the morale that we have within our sheriff's department, our law enforcement units. And so I am really confused about how best to move forward, because I do not want to send a message to you that this board is callous somehow to the crisis that you're in. I do believe this board cares. I do believe we've reached a tipping point in our negotiations, but I want you to know that this board cares about you deeply and is very concerned about where we're at. We're in a nasty budget time, and there are no easy answers here. But I do believe it's time to prioritize your department. And I say that fully recognizing the consequences of that statement. And I want you to know that this board wants to take care of you. I'd like to hear from my colleagues, but I am very concerned with what I've heard, the many, many sources by which it's coming to me, not just from law enforcement. There are many good people in my district concerned about what you're facing. And so I put that out there with full due respect to the teams that have been killing themselves to reach an agreement, but I cannot in good conscience deny what I am seeing and feeling and hearing from so many of you and outside of your department. So I respectfully submit that to my colleagues and know that we need to support the direction of our CAO, but I'm cautious about sending a message that further reduces morale and sends the wrong message to a department I believe is in crisis. Thank you.
Supervisor Gleason.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. $864, Ms. Fernandez, is that what you said? That's ridiculous. Yes. It's ridiculous. I mean, it's ridiculous. There's no other word to describe $864 being the biweekly salary of a uniformed person risking their lives to create a safe environment for her neighbors and her community. It's ridiculous. Okay. Mrs. Benatti, you asked some questions. I'm going to give you some answers. You said, you asked if this board is taking cuts also, and the answer to that is yes. Last year, we took cuts greater than the sheriff took. I don't know what this year is going to look like, but it's probably going to be similar. I don't know exactly what it is, but that is full public knowledge, and I'd be glad to share that with you anytime as we go through this whole deal. Second thing, you asked about if any of us have family members who worry about us coming home. Yes. My wife lived through that for 25 years, and so I'm intimately familiar with that. And so the only reason I offer that to you is to say I easily identify with that spouse who is sitting at home wondering and waiting on what's going on. I easily identify with it and sympathize with it and appreciate it, sincerely appreciate it. We talked about ride-alongs. I'll be going on my second ride-along here. I went on one last year in the Kern River Valley. I think I'm scheduled for another one this week. I'm looking forward to getting an idea on, we had a town hall meeting a couple weeks ago. It was a significant event in my life because I saw fear. I saw worry. The questions weren't, so much on operations and schedule. The questions were, how do I stand in my front door with a gun, and when do I pull the trigger? Or what am I liable for when this happens? So they were more tactical questions than they were philosophical questions. And so the sheriff was there and was good enough to give his best shot at answering those questions, and I think he did a good job of it. So I understood what was going on there. There's several issues that we have in District 1. Kern River Valley is one of them. Ridgecrest Jail is another one of them. Northern Oildale is another one of them. They are all over District 1, and they're all over Kern County. I don't think that we're any different from anywhere else. I think I just want to throw support to the sheriff, thinking that I trust that he's doing the best he can with the limited resources he has. Mr. Anderson, don't you dare leave. Don't leave because you think that we're not working as hard as we can to support you and your teammates. You can leave if you want for any other reason, but please don't leave because you believe that the Kern County Board of Supervisors doesn't care. Please. What I would like to do is, I agree with what you said about prioritizing, and I would like to know, I often say to constituents that we emphasize public safety, and I say we prioritize public safety. And I throw out some number saying 51 or 52% or 63 or 70% or whatever the number is, the latest number that I get, I say that $7 out of every 10 go to public safety. And then I capture those dollars in terms of probation, public defender, district attorney, sheriff, and fire. I would like a better understanding of exactly how we go about prioritizing. So if we move today to go to impasse, and we move to go to negotiations with mediators, at the same time that is happening, I would like to have a breakdown exactly of how we really support each department and how we go about it. So we're just not offering words, we're offering substance and putting some meat on those bones. I would like to understand, because I agree with you, I think the Sheriff's Department needs some prioritization. I think that's about all I had. That's all I had.
Thank you, Supervisor Gleason. Any other comments from members of the board? Okay, seeing none, there's a recommended action by staff to declare impasse in bargaining over the successor MOU with KLEA and request to submit impasse to mediation.
Can I ask a question, Chairman?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. Can I ask CAO's office, we're obviously on the same team trying to resolve an issue that's important to all of us. So I'm just curious if you have any additional remarks to add, given the comments that you've heard and the fact that, we have folks that feel that a imposition of impasses, would really send a certain message. I mean, if you could help to, temper that, I would really appreciate it.
Chairman Scrivener, Supervisor Perez, I think we're at impasse. We are not in agreement. This is about working out a plan that helps us with the recommended budget to your board. At the end of this process, it could be next week, I don't know, it could be very fruitful. We could go in any direction. This is not, going to mediation is not a bad thing. Going to mediation, I think, is healthy. I think that we can get to a place where I'm very hopeful, I'm optimistic in this job, I'm optimistic about everything, hoping we can get to a place where we're in agreement. But I will tell you, at my own risk, that my budget recommendation to you will make law enforcement a priority.
That's very helpful.
Supervisor Maggard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have two communities in my district, both in the greater Bakersfield area, that are discussing amongst their neighbors how to put together citizen patrols because deputies aren't coming. Their fear, my constituents' fear, has been exacerbated because they've been told that a deputy's not going to come. I'm frustrated at the dilemma that we're in, but it isn't just a dilemma of the department not having enough money. The sheriff's department has to find a different way to operate to put more deputies on the street and to retain the ones we have. I can't control the fact that we have a $41 million deficit. That's a real thing. I cannot bankrupt other essential services to the county. I can make adjustments. We have made adjustments. We cut everybody else in the county last year more than we cut the sheriff's department. So there are many things that we can do to try and help, but the reality is it's $41 million. And if we don't fix that, a lot more people don't have a job, including many of our deputies. So there has to be a different way to run the sheriff's department. That's one of the issues. I have a long history of being supportive of law enforcement. I am supportive of law enforcement today. I don't want to send our deputies home with the feeling that we don't care about this, because I do care about this, we care about this. So I see no harm in going back to the table, take a couple of weeks. I don't mean delaying, I don't mean saying we can't show up at that time, I don't mean playing any of the ridiculous games that get played sometimes. Our people and the deputies' representatives, I suggest, need to sit down again. Let's try one more time to see what we can do. If we can't reach it, then we can't reach it. But I believe the earnestness with which we're being approached by our deputies today. And I don't want to exacerbate the labor negotiation atmosphere that we're in, but I don't see any harm in our taking a couple weeks to see if we can find some way to find this. If we cannot, then we cannot, and we have to make tough decisions to go forward. And I am not doing that lightly with the consequences in the families of the deputies that are serving and protecting all of us. I have a great deal of empathy for them, but I suggest to my colleagues that there's no harm in our sending this back and taking a couple more weeks to see what we can work out.
Supervisor Couch.
Well, I do want to respond to some of the stuff that was, some of the comments that were made earlier, the heartfelt comments. And I can be very inarticulate, so just take my comments in the spirit in which I'm intending them, and maybe not the way they come out. But maybe we did a poor job, whenever it was 2 years ago, when we adopted our 4-year plan, which basically said we're going to cut things by X% per year for 4 years to address that $41 structural deficit you've heard our CAO talk about. I guess what we didn't say at that time was it's going to be kind of odd to be handing out raises during this 4-year period while we're cutting each, the county in general and all the departments as a whole. And I also think that, and this is maybe the inarticulate part, that maybe we just, although I think the county had just recently, back in the mid to late 2000s, before 2010, had gone through a difficult financial time. But even then, I think some small raises were given, maybe not to the sheriff's department, but I think people were just not used to this $41 million structural deficit, what it actually meant, and what this 4-year plan probably meant also. And so I guess I would say that, you know, we've been through some issues with the sheriff's department, and those were sort of individualized issues. We didn't cast aspersions on the lot, and we hung in there with you. And I guess I'm just asking you to hang in there with us. And I recognize there are personal financial issues that everybody faces within their family, and you may have to make difficult and tough decisions that maybe you otherwise wouldn't make. But you need to make them for your own self and your own family. I understand that. But I think you've heard I know you've heard every board member say that the Sheriff's Department and public safety is our priority. We say it, but we frankly haven't had a chance to show you that, at least since the last 5 or 6 years. So I guess I'm just asking you to hang in there with us, because they're not just words. And if 2 weeks might get us somewhere else, then I think that's 2 weeks that are well spent. But I think both sides have to come to that with the acknowledgement that this 4-year plan exists, and we have a big problem. We're not asking you to solve it all. I've often said we're not going to get to cast a $41 million vote. We're going to have to cast dozens and dozens and dozens of votes that fix that structural problem over a long period of time. So Supervisor Maggard's suggestion, if the board feels like they want to move in that direction, I would support that. But I think and I would sincerely hope that 2 weeks is beneficial. Thank you.
Supervisor Gleason.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What do I want to say? I forgot what I was going to say. Okay, what I was thinking was, Supervisor Maggard, I appreciate your thoughts. Mr. Brown, is 2 weeks sufficient time for you to re-engage with the union delegation to come back to us and say, okay, we're still at the same place, or we've made headway and we've avoided this whole mess?
Supervisor Gleason, through the chair, I believe we'll need longer if your board is not feeling that we're at an impasse right now, because your board doesn't meet until 2 weeks from today, and we need to discuss further direction regarding our bargaining position with your board in closed session.
What's the minimum time you need?
Probably at least 3 weeks.
Mr. Alsop, could you please give me an idea on any adverse impact that would have on our budgeting process?
Well, we would not allow it to have an adverse impact on our budgeting process. I'd work toward that. We are concurrently headed into, I am with my staff, a discussion on the entire budget now. It's a critical time. It may be a good time to have to focus on this, frankly. All I can tell you, Supervisor, is that if this board wishes for us to continue to work with KLEA, we will do so, and we will work feverishly with them at any time of day that they'd like to meet to try and get something done with them. If they agree that we'll work toward mutual productivity here. an understanding that we've got some issues to deal with, some financial issues to deal with. But we're there, and we will work with them.
Thank you, sir.
Yep.
I'm prepared right now to vote on staff's recommendation. However, I agree with Supervisor Maggart that I think if we can show today that we really, by just giving 3 weeks to negotiations to work as a demonstration to our sheriff's department that we're fully supportive of them as a priority within this county, then I would support and make a motion to effect that change, that delay before we vote to go to impasse. So I'm making a motion. I'm making a motion for a 3-week delay. Come back with us in 3 weeks and see if there's any success in negotiations. If so, great. If not, I'll be supportive of the move toward impasse.
Second.
One moment, please, before we have any other discussion. We're dark on May 30th, so we come back on the 23rd, and I'm presuming that's when we would have a discussion with our labor team. And then we'd be dark the following week, so you're looking at June 6th as the next time that we could agendize this item. And so is the motion to continue this item to June 6th?
That's what I was going to ask.
Well, let me ask the pros from Dover over there.
I don't know if you two were meeting and conferring on your own right now. My point was that we're dark on May 30th. So we have a meeting in 2 weeks, and then we're dark for 2 weeks. So, we're dark for another week. So June 6th, if we were going to discuss this with our labor team in closed, presumably on May 23rd, then June 6th would be the next opportunity to continue this item. At least that's the way I'm reading the calendar. Madam Clerk, do you concur?
Yes, sir, you have that correct.
Okay. Mr. Alsop, please.
Yeah, we agree. June 6th, we'll, if this all works out the way I think we all want it to, we'll have some resolution, and we will let your board know that we've got some resolution, and the culmination of that would be an item that is put on your agenda, whether it's on the 6th or later, for you to agree to an MOU with KLEA.
Okay, so perhaps the best action then would be to refer this back to staff, because we may have a different item on June 6th.
So in an effort to keep Mr. Anderson on staff, I make that recommendation.
I wholeheartedly second that, and also Deputy Fernandez.
Okay, so the motion then is to refer this back to staff. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Okay, please cast your votes.
The motion is approved, all ayes.
That brings us to the conclusion of our agenda today. So absent any more business, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn to Tuesday, May 23rd at 9 a.m.
So moved.
We are adjourned.